If I could ask you to take your seats, please, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to you all, and welcome councillors, officers, members of the public and those that may be joining us via the webcast this afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Maidstone Joint Transportation Board today, Wednesday, the 12th of July 2017. I'll just very quickly deal with the housekeeping, if I may. May I advise you that there are no planned fire drills this evening, so should we hear such a thing, we must consider it to be real, and Ms Tunnicliffe, who's to my right, will find out what's going on and then advise us of the appropriate evacuation. May I also say that tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending on recording these proceedings, can you please let me know now? And I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and other members of the public in the room will know that this is taking place. I can't see that anybody is indicating that they intend to record, and we shall note that, therefore. I'll move straight to the agenda, and I shall take apologies for absence. I know that they've been received from Councillor Wilby and Councillor Carter, and I understand that Councillor Willis may be arriving a little late. Have I missed any?
Geraldine Brown, unable to attend this evening, and it's Councillor Taylor Maggio in her place.
Thank you very much. That's noted for the record. That takes me nicely to the notification of substitute members, so I'll take that notification for the Calc representative as has just been stated. Are there any other substitutes sitting this evening? I don't think there are. I'd also like to, at this point, let you know that as chairman, I agree to waive the requirement in the Constitution which says that petitions have to be submitted at least 2 weeks before the day of the meeting. The reason that I've allowed one of the petitions forward tonight is because it relates directly to our future work programme, and it seemed appropriate that the petition should be received before it comes as an agenda item shortly anyway. May I move on next to the notification of visiting members, and I shall start from my right and work around the room. Save you getting up, Councillor Perry, and would agenda item 13 you would like to speak? Okay, do you want to reserve your right on agenda item 13? Okay. Councillor Barnard? Okay, noted. If I probably you next, Councillor English? Sorry, couldn't see Councillor Spooner there. Just observing. Now you, Councillor English. 12 and 13, that's noted. Don't think there's anybody else that I'm missing. That concludes visiting members. Next, I'll take you to agenda item 4 to consider disclosures. Members and officers, are there any disclosures, please? I see that. Councillor Cook?
Just to note, Chairman, that I've received a number of petitions in relation from the petitioners directly. Okay,
I'll take that as lobbying under the next item, if I may. But no disclosures of interest.
No, I have no.
Okay, so no disclosures are noted, but that does move me nicely to disclosures of lobbying. So back to what you're saying, Councillor Cook.
Do I need to repeat it?
I think you said
Chairman,
emails.
By email in relation to the petitions that are being submitted.
Dare I say that applies to all of us? Okay, so that's noted as lobbying to all members sitting. Are there any other disclosures of lobbying, please? Councillor Cumming.
Did you take that as both item 13 and any other items that we've been lobbied on? Because, again, on item 8, the petition.
Okay, again, it's probably fair to say that at one point or another, many of us have been lobbied on item 13. Can I record that the case for us all? Yes? That's duly done. Agenda item 6, just to consider whether any items...
I'm here for Calc, representing Geraldine, but I'm also going to be speaking on the Langley bypass on behalf of the Parish Council.
Yes, that's noted. And when it comes to speaking on that item, I'll ask you to move to that, and then that will signify your change of role at that moment.
Thank you.
Item 6, so we'll consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. We have no yellow papers before us this evening, and I propose that everything will be in public session. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 7, we have the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of April 2017, circulated with the agenda. I trust you've all had a chance to peruse them and check for their accuracy. If there are no indications for correction, may I take those as a correct record to be signed? Is that agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 8, petitions. We actually have 2 petitions coming to us this evening. We'll allow the presenters to speak to the item, receive the petitions, but there will be no debate on these items this evening. And the first petition relates to Platts Heath Safe Transport Scheme, and I believe is being presented by Miss Hales. If you would like to come to the seat where we've got the blue plastic cups, one along, please. And then when you're ready, if you press the button in the middle to enact your microphone.
Thank you.
There is a 5-minute maximum time limit, please.
Thank you. I'm speaking with regards to the petition before you from the residents of Platts Heath, which primarily concerns our safety. This is due to the size and speed of vehicles which travel from Lenham to Headcorn and also Lenham to South Maidstone via Kingswood. Whilst some of the vehicles are locally based, for example agricultural and local traders and residents, there are an increasing number, including car transporters, logistics lorries, tipper trucks and other construction traffic which appear to use our narrow lanes as a rat run. Vehicles get stuck en route, verges have been eroded by 2 to 3 feet, damage has occurred to facilities, for example a southern water hydrant and highway reflector posts. Some foreign lorries seem unaware of the limitation in road size and their sat-nav systems direct them to and from Lenham via our small village. The 30 mph speed limit is inconsistent throughout the village and often not observed. On Lenham Road, it does not commence at the village welcome sign, rather some 400 to 500 metres nearer the village. On Headcorn Road, there is a break of some 100 metres before the same speed restriction applies through Liverton Street and thence to Grafty Green. This causes some drivers to speed up and then brake suddenly, which is particularly concerning for the primary school, which is in Headcorn Road. Following a fire outside the school some 3 years ago, the damaged tarmac was replaced, but despite requests from the headmaster, the school warning signage on the road was not replaced. Congestion and parking at the school gates has led to, shall we say, discussions between drivers who may be blocking the road or driving too quickly. We have inadequate street lighting and no pavements on key roads. Some residents have offered to assist with a speed watch, and the equipment is available for us to use to carry this out. Almost all adult residents have signed the petition, which I believe you have, and many children asked also to sign it as they are fearful of their safety. We are keen to progress a scheme that improves our quality of life and well-being, and we hope that our council will support us with appropriate speed limits and vehicle management. Many residents have lost pets to through traffic. A few months ago, a speeding car killed a much-loved Labrador in front of the 9-year-old son of the owners. The driver didn't stop and has not been traced. Does this have to be a child before we see action, please? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms Hales. Your petition is now formally received. We will pass it to the appropriate officers, and then there will be a report back at a future meeting of this board. Thank you very much.
I've been asked by residents how long that might be, please, sir.
I'm unable to give you a specific answer, but it is likely to be the next scheduled meeting. But we can keep you advised of that.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
The next petition will be presented by Mr Roots, if he would like to come to the table. And you have the same 5 minutes, and please press the microphone button when you're ready. Can I just check if your microphone is activated?
Okay. Thank you, Chairman, at such short notice for allowing this petition containing 189 signatures as an urgent item following the signing of the Section 106 agreement and granting of outline permission for the Mayfield Nursery development last week. The new development includes an uncontrolled crossing with refuge to be paid for by the developer, but which has to be taken into the Harwich A20 improvement scheme and were built by KCC. I think all would agree that this crossing needs to be sited in a position where it is safe and most useful to as many residents as possible. The position shown on the current scheme right next to Hawkley Lodge's access is not useful to either the new or existing residents to reach the bus stop to Maidstone safely. The crossing is so close to Hawkley Lodge's access that there is every possibility that drivers could either clip the central refuge itself or the opposite curb when turning, and it could mean turning at full lock just at the time when drivers would need to accelerate to join the busy A20. It has been assessed by a very experienced transport consultant as potentially dangerous, and even JMP, who designed the scheme, admitted in an email that drivers emerging from Hawkley Lodge would have difficulties. The footway on the current scheme stops short of the existing bus stop, meaning new residents would need to either cross the road and cross back again, or walk on the often muddy grass verge to reach the bus stop. This could cause them to walk in the road instead. New residents, school-going children and parents wheeling buggies would find it very difficult in muddy conditions to reach the bus stop. The stagecoach buses are all wheelchair accessible, but again, the uneven ground and often muddy conditions would preclude wheelchair users' ability to reach the bus stop without using the roadway, the busy A20. We now turn to existing residents. These include school children from Downlands and Church Lane, as well as wheelchair users and some elderly people who have given up driving. All these may be taking their lives in their hands when crossing the road to reach the bus stop. A crossing in the right place would allow them to cross safely. These people have signed the petition and are residents in the immediate area. The speed limit on this road is currently 40 miles an hour, but being at the village edge, vehicles are often travelling 10 miles an hour or more, and the proposed speed limit reduction to 30 miles an hour is unlikely to change this. The initial scheme, also designed by JMP, did show the crossing near the existing bus stop with a footpath leading to it. This was presented to residents at a parish council meeting and was the only scheme that residents who signed the petition could have seen until I showed them the current version, which had been prepared after it was realised that some of the unexpected developments would not take place, resulting in a funding shortfall. However, Mayfield Development's Section 106 monies for highway improvements alone will total over £170,000, but only a small fraction of this is being spent at this end of the village. MBC's Planning Committee added an informative to the outline permission, stating that a crossing should be sited at the close vicinity of the existing bus stop. Aylsham Parish Council were asked to provide feedback to MBC to pass on to KCC after consultation with residents. This feedback, in a letter to MBC, stated that, as per the informative, their preference is for new footpaths on the south side of the A20 from the Mayfield development to the bus stops, and to have a pedestrian island in the vicinity of the bus stops near to Bailey's Court. The Parish Council also adopted a residential design policy, which was presented to MBC. Paragraphs 3.3 and 3.4 require that development will only be approved if it has safe and suitable access for the site for all people using all forms of transport, and if no harm or hazard is caused to existing residences' accesses. This feedback and document were both agreed by the full Parish Council. So the Planning Committee would like to see the crossing near the existing bus stop. KCC Highways have written that this makes sense and have confirmed that they will seriously consider, on the detailed scheme, to move the crossing and refuge to near the existing bus stop with a footpath linking to the development. Our previous and existing county councillors support this too, and we understand via an email from Jenny Whittle that Councillor Janetta Sams is also supportive of this, as is our MP Helen Waitley. We therefore ask KCC to keep their promise and to take into account the wishes of 189 signatories, MBC's Planning Committee and our present and previous county councillors, as well as the feedback from the Parish Council and the support of Councillor Sams and our MP in ensuring that this important crossing and refuge is moved to near the bus stop where it is safe and useful to all, and that this board agrees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roots. Perfect timing. Again, the petition is now formally received. It will be passed to officers and will feature in a report at a future meeting. Thank you. The next item is questions, statements by members of the public. We have 2 questions submitted this evening. Unfortunately, neither of the writers of the questions are able to be present, but the procedure rules allow that I can read their questions on their behalf. I shall then actually make a short statement of response to each question as well. The first question comes from Mr. Keith Young, and he asks, we, the users of this key link road, Hermitage Lane, are suffering from severe traffic congestion and unacceptable delays. The accompanying large accumulated time delay is costing local businesses and people thousands of pounds in irreplaceable time. Existing local residents and local businesses deserve to know from the decision-making authority how this unacceptable situation can be reduced or eliminated from now on. A response answer has been prepared, and that is that Kent County Council, as local highway authority, acknowledges the concerns that have been raised regarding congestion on Hermitage Lane and the urgent need for road improvements that will reduce delays to local residents, businesses and road users. Key junctions along the route are already earmarked for improvement as part of the Maidstone integrated transport package, and design work is being accelerated to enable schemes to be brought forward at the earliest opportunity. Construction on the first part of the schemes, which involves widening a section of the carriageway to provide a dedicated right turn lane into the retail park from the A20 London Road, is due to commence in August. It is proposed that this board is provided with a full update on all of the schemes along this corridor at the next meeting of the JTB in October, in order to provide a comprehensive response to the question posed. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Very much appreciate that response and the recognition of the need for a full report in October. It is about a year since Mr. Daly and I asked for this, so it's long overdue. Could I just ask for a written copy of the statement you've just read out to be circulated to members, please.
I will ask that that is circulated. The second question comes from Mr. Darren Young, and he asks, it's come to light that the pollution monitoring station close to the Maidstone Bridge River gyratory system was removed in June 2016 to make way for the new road layout. Can I ask when the monitoring station is going to be reinstated back in this location? And the response that's been prepared by Environmental Health Shared Services from Maidstone is that the continuous monitoring station on the bridge gyratory system was removed by KCC at their expense to make way for the new road. This is being replaced at the expense of KCC with a new station which will be positioned near Lower Stone Street, which we concluded based upon advice from consultants and accumulated data would be most relevant position. The station will be replaced as soon as possible. That concludes the questions. The next agenda item is agenda item 10. Councillor Daly. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'd like to welcome the reciting of the monitoring station, having spent a few months in the vicinity of Lower Stone Street. I'm well aware of how acute the pollution issue is there, and I think the sooner we get to grips with that, the better.
Thank you. Agenda item 10 is the work programme for this committee, or this board, and that is just for noting members. So the next item is agenda item 11. This is a petition report in relation to Queen's Avenue, and Mrs. Laporte will present that for us.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Daly, Councillor Daly will be aware that we actually went to Shernard's School with our transportation team, and we spoke to residents and the school regarding the congestion and speeding on Queen's Avenue. I'm pleased to tell you that the speed survey has just been undertaken. That was finished yesterday, so now that's gone forward for the full report to be undertaken to find out exactly what speeds are being driven along Queen's Avenue. Once that's been made, then we'll obviously go back to Councillor Daly and the school and the residents and let them know of any possible ideas we've got surrounding how we can manage the speed along the road. But it obviously depends on what speed is being driven from the report.
Thank you for your update. Are there any members wish to add anything, comment on that? Councillor Daly.
Just to say, Chairman, I was very pleased that the petition was taken so seriously that something did happen within 2 or 3 weeks of our last meeting. And I must say that after having had that consultation, and particularly with the school in Queen's Avenue, I'm quite sure that there will be something more dramatic, shall we say, to hear at the October meeting. I'm quite sure that the officers know exactly now what the problem is, and I think that they're forming an opinion as to how it may be overcome. So I'm looking forward to October, and thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you.
Excuse me. Always good to have a happy Councillor Daly on board. We're next at agenda item 12. Again, this is Mrs. Laporte and also with Mr. Edwards, and it's a report on the A-Board's Action Day.
Thank you. As you were aware at the last meeting, we did mention that we were going to have an enforcement day on the 8th of June. I'm pleased to say that we met up and we did a combined collaborative working with Maidstone Borough Council. We went to all of the shops along Week Street, Gabriel's Hill, Union Street, Brewer Street, and also along Earl Street. We did issue a notice to them and asked them to read the guidelines for abled. So I've got a copy of that if anyone wants to see it after the meeting. And so far we've had a 33% uplift on all of the shops coming back and signing up to the programme. As a result of that, you should soon be seeing some signs in shop windows that say, you can't really see it, but I'll show you it afterwards, that the shops are abled aware. They are working with Kent County Council and Maidstone Borough Council to actually work to a protocol for having one abled outside their shop. Following on for that, the streets cleansing people at Maidstone Borough Council will check and make sure that the rules are kept and the guidance is followed. And we will follow it up next year with another annual inspection to make sure there's full compliance.
That sounds very good. Is there anything you want to add, Mr Edwards? Thank you. I think Councillor English, you wanted to speak on this item as visiting member.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Firstly, may I thank your predecessor in the chair there, Councillor Hodson, and the officers from Kent County Council and Maidstone Borough Council for finally getting to grips with this pernicious pestilence that A-boards are. To be fair, many shopkeepers do use them properly, but there are a number of premises in Maidstone, I won't embarrass them at this point by naming them, that have up to 7. I would say that despite the fact it took place on the day of the general election, when a lot of people had other concerns, that the joint exercise has been reasonably successful so far. And I would hope that as with other enforcement efforts elsewhere in local government, the education effort will continue for a while longer. My only caveat is, clearly there are going to be some people, and we can already guess who they are, who are just going to simply ignore the advice, the warnings, the nudges, the general peer disapproval and whatever. So enforcement action will need to be taken at some point, although I think there is still some time for education. And I do welcome the acknowledgement in the report that the processes are there. My only caveat is, I think, as this is the initial phase, I think annual inspections going forward are probably going to be sufficient. But given this is basically year 0 for actually enforcing this policy, I think we probably will need something a little earlier than 1 year in the first year as we're trying to get good habits established. That's my only caveat. And I look forward to working with you in future. I would say that I represent the Borough Council on 1 Maidstone, and we have been very, very pleased as the representatives of the business community in the town centre to join in with this project, and it is making a significant difference to the look of the town, and I just hope we can seal the deal. Thank you for all you're doing and continuing to do.
Mr Edwards.
Yes, if I could respond to those. Yes, you're absolutely right. The elections meant we wasn't able to assist KCC as much as we want. KCC will be undertaking a 1-year check, but we will be checking throughout the year, and with the support of KCC, that should happen quite easily. We have operatives on the ground, and they will be aware of the rules with training that we provide. As for the threat, as everything needs a threat, we will be using a two-tier policy, which you'll get the initial information, you'll be given that information again, and if you're found to be in breach of these rules, we will simply remove your sign and store it, and if the business wish to collect that, then they'll contact me directly, where I can speak to them on a one-to-one basis, make them aware, and if they carry on, we just won't give back their sign. It's as simple as that. These signs are very expensive. They're very annoying as well. So I think softly would do for the first couple of warnings, and then just take the sign away and remove the problem altogether.
Thank you very much indeed for that, and that is most welcome.
Councillor Hodson, you wanted to speak on this?
Briefly, Chairman, I can't tell you, Chairman, how honoured I am to get those wonderful words of thanks from Councillor English. And I actually think they were sincere, Chairman. All I want to say, Chairman, I think the report is very factual. It's taken a decade to get here.
And the good thing, the pleasurable thing, is it just shows how two local authorities can work together. Thank you.
Thank you for those words. Councillor Cumming.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I note on page 9, section 3.1, the last part of that says only one A board is permissible for each business. Now, I've seen up to half a dozen A boards side by side in the Rose Yard or Market Buildings area, spreading across more than half of the fairly wide pavement there. There's obviously a big obstruction, but they probably do have only one per business, but they're all in the same place. So what control do we have on that?
We are encouraging the businesses in Rose Yard to adopt flower displays and window boxes, and also to put up pennants up above the shop window to remove the A-board situation. So we are working with them. They are the areas where people haven't been so compliant at this stage.
Thank you. Any further questions, members? So perhaps if we record our thanks to the officers from both authorities for the work that they've been doing on this, it's very much appreciated, and we'll note that in the minutes. Thank you. Next we come to agenda item 13. This report relates to the Leeds Langley Relief Road update and is to be presented jointly, I believe, with Mr. Reid and Mr. Farmer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to introduce John to you. John's worked for KCC since 1970. He's got 47 years' experience in building roads, and he is the most eminent authority I know on the Leeds Langley bypass as it was on the Relief Road as it is now, because he was involved in all the original planning that went on in some of our memories anyway, certainly. So having built him up for certain failure, John's going to talk you through the report, and then we'll happily take questions.
Well, I'm really worried now. That's what happens to football managers, isn't it? They get sacked the day afterwards. Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. The report before you is an update on where we are, further work planned over the next year, and a commentary on wider aspects that I think are important if this scheme is to progress. A lot of work has been done on route options, variations of route, junction options, and that was explained in closed session of this board back in spring of 2016, and had also been shared in confidence with parish councils around that time. Now, what is missing from my perspective is that, and again, in the paper, it talks in general terms about the benefits and also the disadvantages and the difficulties. From my perspective, what is missing is that we need some really scheme-specific, robust traffic work aimed particularly at the bypass. All the work that Brendan has done with the local plan is, if you like, at a higher level over the whole area. But we really need specific traffic work that looks at the schemes, looks where people are going to and from, how many people will go on the Relief Road, any difference in the options, whether there should be a link to connect to the road halfway between Langley and Leeds, how one should deal with the existing road, because that will still remain quite attractive. Now, schemes have a whole range of benefits. There are environmental benefits, clearly getting traffic out of Leeds and Langley, for instance. Schemes have benefits where they help employment. Schemes have benefits where they help housing. But if you like, a baseline for government is, and it's been established for 40, 50 years, is that, if you like, they always look first at the quantifiable monetary benefits. They like to see what are the actual journey time savings in hard pound notes, what are the fuel savings, what are the accident savings, and that really does need this robust traffic work so we can look at that and actually establish what the cost-benefit ratio is. And as a minimum, government looked, they don't really want to consider a scheme if it hasn't got a cost-benefit ratio greater than 2. In other words, the benefits over 25, 30 years are double what the actual cost of the scheme are. Now, this will take up to a year, and that may seem a long time, but if you take it in stages, we need to commission consultants. They will need to undertake surveys. They will need to build a traffic model. They will need to validate that model to show that it actually reflects what's happening on the ground at the moment. And then they will actually need to test the options and all the permutations. And so that's why I say I think it would take up to a year to do that. Now, on the commentary at the back end of the report, I'm just making some general points there, that all major schemes are expensive, and funding remains the difficult issue for this and for any authority trying to promote a major scheme. But success will always be improved if there is widespread local, community and political support. It helps your chance. Government, again, don't fund schemes completely, so it's important that contributions towards the scheme are maximised as much as possible. A major concern of the local community and with any new scheme is that it achieves the benefits that everyone is after, which is getting traffic out of Leeds and Langley, but then it actually has the sort of the inconsequential effects of actually encouraging development. So it's important that there is strong planning policy that actually achieves the road but doesn't suddenly attract inappropriate housing that nobody wants. And again, I feel that the local community do need, as part of their contribution, to not only support the scheme that's ultimately decided upon, but I think also to accept some housing as a demonstration of their commitment to the scheme and as a contribution towards the scheme. So, to summarise, traffic modelling over the next year. Throughout that, we will continue liaison with local members and parish councils, and I anticipate a report back to this board at about this time next year. I think in the report I said spring, but the summer's already marching upon us, and I think, being realistic, I think it's probably going to be about this time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Now I have 2 parish speakers registered. I'll take them first, then visiting members. I'll start with Councillor Mrs. Taylor-Maggio. She registered first. So at this moment she moves from being the CALP representative to speaking on behalf of Langley Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Langley, an historic rural parish of 580 homes, is already taking the brunt of development in the borough's local plan, including 1,300 homes on greenfield sites with another 1,000 on its borders. We would not support any bypass route through Langley that was allowed to act as a magnet for infill development along its length, in addition to the local plan sites, thereby destroying the area we seek to preserve, engulf Langley Heath and join rural Langley to Parkwood. With a new road in an area where every field has been offered for development, the housing number for Maidstone could rise astronomically yet again, as further building would no doubt not be restricted by those who would wish to see our borough turn into a massive conurbation. The additional population would generate even more traffic congestion, and we would need a bypass to bypass the bypass within 10 years. A bypass would trigger the development of all the sites that have come forward in Langley, Leeds, Otham, Bolton-on-Telsey and Chart-Sutton. Such massive potential further development with corresponding traffic would adversely affect the future quality of life for all Maidstone residents. Such development, no doubt welcomed by those with a financial interest, would bring massive population growth and adversely impact the borough's water supply, sewerage system, roads, schools and hospitals. Any Langley Leeds bypass should be just that, a bypass around Langley and not a road through Langley Heath. village. Langley already has two major roads running through it, the A274 Sutton Road and the Leeds Road, creating traffic noise and air pollution. Adding a third major road through our parish from the west would turn Langley Heath into a traffic island, bringing yet more noise and pollution. Its precious fields, orchards and network of country footpaths would be infilled with housing, as future planners would not resist the temptation. A road to the west of Langley would not ease traffic congestion on the Sutton Road, as most traffic comes from Headcorn, Coxheath and Staplehurst and travels to the town, schools, Morrison's supermarket and the Aldi supermarket opening soon at Langley Park. Access to the M20 would still be via the Leeds Road at Five Wents Crossroads, rather than through Langley to reach any new road north of Horseshoes Lane. In summary, if the need for a bypass is fully demonstrated by KCC Highways, there would need to be legal restrictions, not just malleable planning policies, to prevent development within a mile either side to preserve the natural environment. Number two, funding other than yet more houses, that is, funding mainly from outside the borough, and consultation on any proposed route with Langley Parish Council and other directly affected parish councils at an early plan stage and certainly prior to public consultation. Finally, proven need, environmental considerations and external funding must together be the driving force for any bypass, leaving no place for emotionally driven or votes-driven political ambition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like Mr. Farmer, I also remember when the Leeds-Langley bypass, as it was then, was first mooted. And at that moment in time, some of you may remember that there was a group of 14 parishes. Shall I go to this one? Is it difficult to hear me? Are you okay? There was a group of 14 parishes in the southwest of Maidstone called TRAMP, who represented the communities on traffic management problems. And we had huge reservations about the Leeds-Langley bypass for one very good reason. It stops at the Five Wents Crossroads. And if you've got the map, you can see going east to west, you have this lovely new road, which is going to draw traffic off the M20, gets to the Five Wents, and in fact will continue on its merry way around what could then be called the Southwest Maidstone bypass, or the B2163, through Bolton Monchelsea, through Coxheath, and eventually through Linton and into Yalding. We still have those reservations, and I don't think any plans or any modelling has been done to have a look at that. So could I ask at this moment in time, as it has been indicated in further feasibility work, that we do give a look at the effect on the B2163 westward and what the effect of attracting traffic off the M20 onto that road is. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Reid, would you like to respond?
Yeah, we certainly will be doing that. And just to respond to what Mrs. Taylor-Maggio said, certainly we would consult fully with all the parishes affected long before we get to the point where we're putting lines on maps and people are getting concerned about house sales and all of the issues that go with a road of this scale. So just at this point to assure you that the modelling certainly would look very far and wide around the whole of the southeastern part of the town and the town itself, of course, and the impact on traffic and air quality, etc. And we would, of course, go and see each individual parish as the work progresses. And that would start probably as early as the autumn of this year, that process of engagement with the parish councils.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, can I just say, when you talk about parish councils, as I indicated, it's not just Leeds and Langley, it is the parishes of the whole of the south and southwest of Maidstone that are affected as well.
Yeah, of course, naturally, yeah.
Mr. Egerton, did you want to contribute?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm grateful to the KCC officers for their instruction in that regard. representing Maidstone Borough, I'm Planning Strategy Manager for Maidstone Borough Council. I wanted to just draw on a couple of points here. I'm grateful that they've introduced this issue that we will have around funding, I think, and it's been represented by the speakers today as well. It's tricky to assume that Section 106 funding, as highlighted in paragraph 5.6, is going to be a significant contributor at this stage. There's a couple of things I think I ought to just draw out. Firstly, that the sort of funding we're talking about here, 50 to 75 million according to the report, is obviously quite significant. And if we aren't in a position to get government funding, which I think would be everyone's preference, the reliance would then be potentially around Section 106 funding. Well, the current set of Section 106 funding from existing development is quite constrained. Wording in these legal agreements is very tightly written to ensure that we can't just chop and change in that regard, I suppose. The second thing to say is that the Section 106 agreements would have to be funded by some development or other. And so with a scheme of this size, there would need to be a reasonable amount of development in principle contributing to these sort of sums. So effectively what we do have is a situation now where we look forward to working with county council officers, but we will be looking from a local plan, a Maidstone local plan, and a review of that local plan by April 2021 for sort of tangible evidence, I suppose, that there is a sort of preferred route for Leeds Langley, so that Section 106 contributions can be agreed. The other point I would actually make is that with the local plan review, we as a borough council will be required to look at all options when it comes to the location of future development and the amount of future development that takes place, housing and otherwise. And so we would need to test all of those options, and the results, if it resulted in a Leeds Langley Relief Road, that would be one of the options which we'd need to go through a robust and rigorous process to get towards. So I think, in summary, we are cautiously welcoming the officers' thoughts on this and look forward to working with them, but there will be significant hurdles, especially financially, and we will need to go through a robust process with our own local plan in that regard too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Board members, a number of you have indicated that you will be wishing to speak. Could I ask that to assist me, you put your name plates upright, then nobody gets missed, everybody knows that they're seen, and I will work systematically round the room. I will move to visiting members next, but before doing so, Councillor Mrs Ring telephoned me earlier this afternoon from her hospital bed, unfortunately, and regrets that she can't be here tonight. She particularly did want to speak on this item and register her support for the report that officers have presented, and wanted to highlight what she saw as the benefits to some of her residents in the Wellington Street area. And I'm sure you'll join me in wishing her a speedy recovery. I shall take visiting members, and I shall start in the order that we registered. I think, Councillor Perry, you wanted to speak on this item. If you would come to the microphone, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I will be brief. I do welcome this report. The report rightly highlights benefits from developing a Leeds Langley Relief Road, which would include air quality improvement and traffic congestion relief, especially for the villages of Leeds and Langley and associated environmental benefits. I recognise that the additional housing has already contributed to increased traffic congestion and air pollution, and this can only get worse with further housing. A Leeds Langley Relief Road is now essential. Mitigation measures such as modal shift, while worthy, can only make a difference at the margin, and something more must be done to resolve what is a fast becoming an impossible situation. As for attracting more housing, we're already there, actually, and I believe further housing could be controlled. The benefits to the urban area are, for me, self-evident. However, rural communities would also benefit from the improved access to the motorway network, which would provide a much-needed boost to the rural economies, even the borough. I consider that the Leeds-Langley Road scheme, as identified in Action 8.7 of the Maidstone Integrated Transport Strategy, must now be accelerated and given top priority. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Councillor Barnard, you wanted to speak next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. A lot's been said before I've got to speak, and quite a lot of it really pertains to what I've got in here, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. Taking into account the government's announcement of £1 billion being made available for bypasses around the country, are Kent County Council finally going to get their act together and get cracking on the relief road to the east of Maidstone? The residents of Leeds, Langley, Ottham, Dowswood, Shetway, Willington Street and the surrounding areas have put up with the misery of thousands of vehicles thundering past their homes for many years, and now the time has come to end that misery. No amount of talking will get the road built, and there is no fairy godmother around to wave a magic wand and make it appear. Only action, and action now, will solve this problem and give the people of this part of Maidstone the peace and quiet, let alone the safety they have longed for and deserved for many years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor English, were you next to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, may I welcome may seem a strange place to start, but may I welcome something Mr. Farmer said. I represent High Street Ward, and I'm very well aware of the consequences of the blight that pertained for many, many years because of the route of the putative Southern Approach Road that was never, in fact, built. So whatever else is done, we must be very, very careful not to blight properties for years and years with potential routes. It has to be a judicious process conducted without carelessness but with speed. Although I've got to be careful about advocating speed in relation to roads, but I'm sure members know what I mean. The report, I think, was very balanced and set out very fairly why we are in this position and why we are not. I don't think, contrary to some things that have been said, that we are in this position of not having the Leeds-Langley Relief Road, whatever we're calling it, at this particular point going forward because of any political issues. What we are seeing is that we have had difficulty, both local authorities and indeed parish councils, with, shall we say, divisions of opinion on routes and approaches, and there have been significant problems with funding. But that does not mean that these issues are insuperable. They are not. The proposed route, for want of a better term, that's set out in the report is very sensible. We need to know very clearly what the potential benefits are, what the potential route could be, and if that is established, the Borough Council as a planning authority should be able to establish what's needed to be done to fund it. It would be sealed by then, not Section 106, one assumes. The difficulty I think we've had in the past is that for whatever reasons we've ended up talking about road schemes at a particular point in the timetable, and we've been talking about housing and economic development in a different time frame. And what's needed with the Leeds-Langley bypass is to bring together planning policy, development control policy and the road plans at the same time. And if we have the actual robust feasibility studies, route plans, cost-benefit analysis, we must commit ourselves as authorities, whatever our differences have been, political, philosophical, to actually get on and establish once and for all what is practical, what isn't, and then get on and deliver it. Because, frankly, the residents of Maidstone and the rural parishes around, and I do take on board Councillor John Wilson and Councillor Cheryl Taylor DiMaggio's point, need to have a certainty about what the outcome is and how we need to proceed. Because this issue has been dragging on, well, I was going to say 30 years, but it's longer than that, isn't it? Might be 50 years when we first started talking about this. And I've certainly... I think, yes, I think it might have been slightly after Councillor Daly was a young man, but not long afterwards. So I would say that speaking with the Maidstone Borough Council hat on, and from a planning perspective, we have really got to get on and nail this one. And as far as I'm concerned, and my colleagues in my party, we will absolutely support going forward and nailing this down as soon as possible, because it has to be done.
Thank you for your comments. Now, there's very many that want to speak, that's quite clear. I want to take Chairman's privilege and say my very tiny bit first, and then I'll move systematically round the room, and I shall start from my left and move clockwise. And when we come to speaking, I'm sure there's going to be lots of duplication and overlap. So what I would ask everybody is to, rather than repeat word for word what somebody's already said, simply say you agree or support, and then we can try and be as succinct as possible. But just to start the ball rolling, if I might ask a couple of questions which probably relate to the traffic modelling, and not wishing to make it too techie. We talk about doing the detailed traffic modelling. Did I hear correctly that there's to be a new base model that this will be assessed against? Or will it use the 2014 VISM base model as its foundation stone? The reason I'm asking that is to see whether the benefit will be measured against 2014, 2017. I'm not quite sure how that works. And then just very briefly, with my Borough Council ward hat on, I represent Marden and Yalding. And, I can tell you there's significant support in those areas for such a route as this, for the purposes of what some would regard as the escape route from the south to be able to access the motorway network. And certainly in the context of Yalding, speaking to residents and parish councillors there, it is identified that a lot of traffic actually maybe heads south from Maidstone and might try to escape via the A21 passing through Yalding. And there's certainly a rat running effect through the lack of a route at the moment in that way. And when we come to the traffic modelling, and I do understand it's all down to cost-benefit ratios, will that be taken into account? Will the cost benefits be summed up from as far afield, or what seems to be as far afield as Yalding? And in cost-benefit analysis, is there a quotient that goes into the sum? So we've got a lot of HGVs that perhaps use, say, Willington Street as a route because it's a residential area. Now we can see what the sums might be for shorter routing of diesel consumption, but is there a value that will be attributed to the quality of life factor that comes through in the cost-benefit ratio? So it's all about the modelling, if we could have some response around that.
Okay, so the base model, the 14 base model, wouldn't necessarily have to be rebuilt for this exercise. I mean, we would get the consultants on this, and we'd be, taking their advice. But from my experience over the years, 2014 isn't a bad base to be working from when we're here in 2017. What you can do with base models, providing they're not too out of date, is use a local traffic factor. So because we've got an extensive database of traffic volumes in Maidstone, we know what's happened to them as a rule in proportion across the vehicle types between 14 and 17, for argument's sake, or 2018. And we would factor up the base model to take account of modern conditions so that it wasn't out of date. So we would hope to avoid rebuilding the entire base model. In terms of cost-benefit analysis, to my knowledge, there isn't a monetisation or a monetised value associated with quality of life. You might not be surprised to know that the Department for Transport that standardises the way these things are looked at puts a value on time, it puts a value on, obviously, on fuel, and there are even values on accidents and the cost to society of accidents. Those figures are renewed each year by the Department for Transport, and we would use the most up-to-date factors at that time. Unless John knows any different, the idea of quality of life is not quantified per se in cost-benefit analysis, although it's clearly an important part of any business case that you put forward for a scheme. What you can do is provide supplementary evidence around local residents' feelings, etc. And you can include, if you like, resident surveys on how they feel about their community and some of the biggest issues which affect their lives. So, and usually traffic volume and traffic speed is quite high up on that. So we would certainly look to put that in as supplementary evidence, but it's not empirically based, to my knowledge. Will the modelling benefits extend as far out as Yalding Mud? And they certainly will, because Maidstone's journey to work area and the issue of travel and the zones that exist around this town that we live in go a long way south, and indeed, well, for those that remember the Southern Approach and all the issues around that, there is travel to and from this town and through this town right from the south coast, and we have national databases which we can use. There's a national travel model, there's national travel surveys that consultants use to estimate how far afield the traffic is coming from. And it's important for us to remember in the consultation that we will ask opinions from people that not only live in the surrounding area, but that also travel through it.
Thank you. That was a very full answer. I'm going to start on my left then. Councillor Mrs Hastie.
Bit shocked there. I just wanted to add my support to the officer's report and hope we can work quickly towards a solution to the problem.
I like that. Straight to the point. Councillor Bird.
Well, Chairman, I'd like to pick up a point that Councillor Wilson raised, but not in the way that he raised it. There has, as you know, been quite a lot of development in Coxheath in the last couple of years, and further development is being considered. And as part of that development, my understanding is that quite a lot of 106 monies have been set aside for the redesign or improvement to the Linton Crossroads. My understanding is that there is no scheme yet in place for that, but the 106 monies which are in place are time limited. Now, clearly, as Councillor Wilson has pointed out, this new the Leeds Langley Relief Road would have an impact along the Linton Crossroads, to the Linton Crossroads. What I would very much urge officers is that we do not wait for the Leeds Langley Relief Road scheme to be in place before we sort out Linton Crossroads, because that really is urgent.
We certainly won't. This road's a long way off, and there are contributions from developers that have been gathered for a specific purpose. And anything we do in the interim, whether it be at Linton or on the Sutton Road itself, has to deal with the problem now and as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of points. With regard to pollution, I think the problem is that the only way that trucks can currently get to Park Wood, which is one of our major industrial areas in Maidstone to the south, is via Willington Street or Stone Street. The dense, packed urban areas with much housing, and then on top of the general traffic, which is already congested with the increased housing, we've got all the trucks that are travelling to Park Wood. So I think the concept of trucks being able to get off of Junction 8 and travel along a road that isn't a dense urban area it is going to significantly reduce pollution for all of Maidstone residents, especially those in the town. At the end of the day, it's all stop-start traffic as it is, and then on top of that, you've got the trucks that are competing. In terms of how we get this plan, we've got the two options of government grant funding or through Section 278 or Section 106. To date, we have had a very poor, how can I say, a very poor contribution to this type of, how can I say, panacea, maybe a little too grand. We've had 3 very large housing schemes at Langley that are currently in place and rolling out. I was there and I objected to all 3 of them in planning. Unfortunately, when that came to planning, the report from KCC indicated that there should be traffic measures along the A274, and that's been linked to a bus priority measures. We tried to get it changed. It was originally going to be a bus lane. We got some movement on that, but unfortunately, a major amount of housing that adds impact to congestion in that area does not have a contribution towards this sort of scheme. And that's really where I think there needs to be a major change in our approach. You've got the borough and you've got the county. And unfortunately, when the planning committee meets and it looks at these developments in Maidstone, we rely on KCC to really put a steer in terms of what's needed with that additional housing or maybe it's industrial development. And it's very difficult, if a scheme is rejected and goes to appeal, it's very difficult for that not to, it's very likely that will be, the appeal will be upheld by the government inspector if members of the committee have concerns about roads and highways have not put forward schemes that are required, or they may say that this is inappropriate because this is what's going on to the roads. So I think there really does need to be some real big picture thinking in terms of how we move forward, because we've already got a lot of our housing development in Maidstone planned already, or planning applications in place, and we're nowhere near. You know, we're looking at sort of crumbs for this development as we stand, and the sort of money we're talking about. You know, I think we're nowhere. We haven't even changed the paradigm to look at ways of getting that funding. I would like to mention. I can actually mention Linton Crossroads, in fact, because there was a major job scheme that came to planning last week for 1,000 jobs in the south of Maidstone. And it's sad, really, because in the south of Maidstone, we don't want it to be a commuter belt. We don't want it to be a bedroom community. We want to have the whole profile of amenities and jobs, and we want that to expand alongside of the housing. But the one major concern for this particular site was the fact that there were going to be 1,000 jobs and there were going to be transport movements along the A229 in Linton, and yet there's nowhere for those vehicles to go. Now, with that scheme, there actually was a plan included to make a change at Linton Crossroads. There was an offer to allow a section of the field alongside as you approach heading north to the Linton Crossroads. The westerly field, a section of that will be donated to allow for a left-hand turn lane into Coxheath, which will provide some relief at that junction. But my point is that we would like to have job sites coming forward. We want that sort of profile, and we need something to allow it to happen. And I think that is the sort of, if it was Donald Rumsfeld, it's the sort of unknown. We need to look at what opportunities we're going to miss, not just what's there at the moment. And maybe we could start by part of this review. Maybe if highways are able to start with the surrounding businesses, and Parkwood is an obvious starting point, survey them, find out where their trucks are going. How do they get into Maidstone? How do they get out of Maidstone? What sort of benefit would there be for them?
Can I ask you to make your conclusion now, please?
If they didn't have to go to Willington Street and the town.
Thank you. Councillor Chittenden?
better. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I was used to the county buttons. This is a different thing for me. I'm going to put aside any politics, although I've seen a lot of it floated around in the last week or two. We do know this is a cross-party decision with regard to the local plan and the 18,000 driven by government. Putting that to one side, I don't think around this table today there is a difference of opinion about the benefits that a Leeds-Langley bypass would give. It would no doubt at all, for most of the south of Maidstone, whether it's Marden, whether it's Staplehurst, whether it's coming from the Sutton Road itself, whether it comes across from Coxheath, I think there would be a huge benefit. It would come out at Junction 8, and I no doubt there'll be more discussions about that, but the roads can be designed reasonably well to integrate. But I was pleased also with what I heard from Councillor Maggio. There's got to be another side to this story, and that side, I think, is truly represented by the report come out by officers. It is shown how we need to start the first stage of this, but it's always given us the rough, also given us the rough with the smooth. When you look at what is around at the moment, there is no money to build it, and we're talking 50 to 70 million. We heard last week about a government initiative, which everybody called it, I think it's called the bypass something or another. We don't know what it's about. It may not even come out. There may be another about turn. But if it does, we're still going to have to find a big chunk of that 50 or 75,000 ourselves. And the thought is that you could end up, if we don't watch it, building a road to attach to 5,000 houses. And we've just got to remember the inroads that were attempted by Golding Homes a couple of years ago, but that's exactly what they were proposing. So we've really got to be very, very careful. KCC have to take the lead. We have to work very, very closely. I think this this group will take an even more important role as we go through, because there's got to be this understanding between KCC and Maidstone about how this progress. But as for disagreeing with it, no, at this time I don't think we do. I certainly welcome your report, so thank you for that. It's given at least a timetable for that first year. I think the real crux with this will be coming after that. It could be over the next 5 years, trying to get that balance in relation to the road and the potential, what it means to bring in more houses over and above the 18,000 we've got now. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mrs Stockwell, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that we've talked about this for an awfully long time, and Mr Farmer and I go back a long way on this, with Mr Bruce Lockhart, when we discussed it with routes, and we've changed routes, but it seems to be getting nearer. All I'd like to say is that really at the rear of Langley, which I think is going to take the brunt of this route to bypass Leeds and, you know, a bit of Langley, there is very high-value agricultural land the rear there, and there's very sort of high-value landscape, which will need some protection, strong protection. But also, Langley has taken quite a lot of housing. I know it says here about, you know, enabling development. I think you mentioned something, Chairman, but H110 is quite a significant site in Langley, and there are other sites, but, you know, and they don't really want to fill up with a load more houses. Langley Park there is going to be quite significant when it is built out. But I'm just wondering what it's going to do for 75 million. I think it'll attract more traffic than it has now. I think people will come across to any road that is made better, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So I'm not a great fan of this at all. So, you know, I just think it's not going to do anything really for Langley, and that's what I'm worried about.
Councillor Hodson, your turn.
Thank you, Chairman. And not to be repetitive, but I'm going to break that rule because Councillor Clark's upset me. And I like Councillor Clark. He's a very sound individual. But it does stem from what officers said earlier on Section 106 money. And I understand where Maidstone are coming from on the difficulties of allocating to other sites. But I'm not clear on that, and I think this process ought to determine a stronger attitude from Maidstone Borough Council and Kent County Council on saying if there are 500 homes going here, money is needed because of there, and there ought to be a pot, and that pot should be accumulating now. Councillor Barr, I remember you when you were in my group, Councillor Barr, when you were a real good councillor, and I'm sure you're an even better one now. It isn't £1 billion, sadly, and let's forget £1 billion. It's £1 billion across the country. It's not £1 billion for Kent. And if you divide that across the country, think how much that might be for Kent. So I think we ought to get that clear straight away. And lastly, we've mentioned it quite a lot this evening with A-boards and cross-party. Kent County Council and Maidstone Borough Council, officers, yes, we'll work closely. Officers have to work closely on this. And the planning officer from Maidstone, who again is a very able officer, he upset me because he said, we cautiously welcome this report. I never want to hear that word again when we talk about this particular scheme. There has to be a warm response, not a cautious response, because I think that's going to be so important for the next year, as Mr. Farmer tells us, before we see something positive on our plate.
Thank you, Councillor Hodson. I can't help but think it isn't the old adage, don't ask, don't get. So there might be £1 billion to share amongst many, but if we don't ask, we certainly won't get. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. I think quite clearly at the moment there is an unacceptable traffic situation, not just in the south of Maidstone, but across the whole borough. I doubt many of us would reject that view. Clearly, Maidstone is a site of convergence of many different routes. Anything we can do to alleviate the amount of traffic going through the town centre, thus down the Lewes Road, down the Sutton Road, Willington Street, where pollution is exceptionally high. You only need to drive along and look at the size of the buildings, and you can see that you don't need any sort of special monitoring equipment. Anything which will alleviate such pressure can only be a good thing. We are continuing to develop, quite clearly. Many residents haven't yet moved in, so this is going to get worse. Car ownership is increasing. We also have to accept that in the future we are going to continue developing. Now, the sites of those developments certainly are up for discussion, but at the end of the local plan we're not going to completely stop house building in Maidstone and in Kent. That is going to continue. On that basis, surely we must encourage a relief road now so that we can take any future development. It is better to have such a road in place at this stage before residents move in. And my final point, I'm actually quite disappointed with a comment that's already been made about a relief road being vote-driven. All of us here who are elected by our residents, and we have a clear commitment to represent those views. Quite clearly, this is something which is of massive importance, not just to the residents in my own division, but across the whole of Maidstone, and also the rural areas. We are here to discuss what is in the best common interest, not merely the views of a select few. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Prendergast.
Thank you, Chairman. A lot's been said tonight. Some have said more than others. But I just want to... I can see that there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done. You know, the traffic modelling, so we can find the route with the least environmental impact. We're going to have to look at things like unintended consequences. But Mr Farmer mentioned that there was a closed session briefing for members in spring 2016. Well, since then, we've had Maidstone Borough Council elections. There are new members here, and Kent County elections, and I can see there are new members on this board who haven't had the benefit of that briefing. So is there an opportunity? There are going to be some very important conversations, some important decisions, and I think a member briefing sooner rather than later would be of great benefit. Well, it would be for me, certainly. So if we could organise that, or if there is a possibility for that, I think it would be extremely helpful.
I think that the briefing you referred to was one where there was some consideration of routes, absolutely no decision-making. Mr. Reid, do you want to comment?
That will all be part of, just to reassure you, Mrs Prendergast, that will all be part of the programme that we work up for the next 12 months in detail, because we've clearly got to engage the parishes and county councillors and borough councillors. All of that is to come. So please be assured that's certainly what we'll be doing.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, which I haven't had regarding the Leeds Langley bypass really for a long time. I remember being elected for the first time and attending my early meetings of parish councils in Leeds, and I have been dealing with this issue and advocating a relief road bypass, call it what you like, for the last 8 years. And I've heard excuses and I've heard all sorts of reasons why it can't be. And here we are this evening, and we're all discussing reasons why not only can it be, but reasons why it should be. And I welcome all of the comments I've heard this evening. It is gratifying. I think I once said that I'm going to keep banging my head against that brick wall regarding a Leeds Langley relief road until either my head gives way or the wall gives way. Well, maybe this evening I'm beginning to see the wall give way, and that is to be welcome. Could I just, as a matter of clarification, please, Chairman, because an email has been circulated to all members which talks about your and my intentions in terms of joining up dots for a western route that would link Parkwood and Junction 8 industrial Junction 8 industrial warehousing sites, which is David Burton and Gary Cook's intention. Well, the lady who wrote that email has no knowledge of my intentions. I've never discussed this with her, because I have never ever, I have studiously, and the officers will know this, and my parishes will know this, I have studiously avoided the discussion of particular routes. I would not do so. And also, in relation to Junction 8, which maybe, Chairman, something that you and I actually do disagree on, I am not an advocate of any industrial warehousing sites at Junction 8, and since the days of KIG, have felt very strongly that Junction 8 should be preserved much as it is. So I hopefully the author of this will have the courtesy to apologise and correct the record. Could I...
Can I just say on that note, I don't think I've actually seen this email, so perhaps you'll share it with me afterwards.
I'll be delighted to, Chairman. Could I also say, though, that in terms of potential routes, the report doesn't talk about routes per se because it doesn't wish to prejudge it. And I don't have any feeling for a western route versus an eastern route versus a little bit of west and a little bit of east and what have you. But I do think, and this is what the report does for us this evening, is that it recognises that this is not just about Leeds or Langley. It recognises that it is a much wider aspect of that. And people driving down Willington Street these days will be left in no doubt as to the feelings of the residents in that part of the town as to what their thoughts are about the relief road with the signage that now exists. And I welcome that signage, and I welcome their views. I do think that we have to make the case. To make the case properly requires the investigation, it requires the work that the officers have talked about this evening. If there is £1 billion available for bypasses and to help reduce congestion, available on a national basis, then we have to have the accurate data with which to put forth the strongest possible case to attract that funding to Maidstone and to Kent generally. So I welcome that, and I do think that what the assurances the officers have given us is entirely appropriate. But could I just make one final observation, Chairman, and a request, which I'm sure Tim and John, I don't want to go away after this, and I think we're all going to welcome the report, but I don't want to go away and say, well, okay, fine, that's it for another year. In a year's time, Mr. Reid and Mr. Farmer are going to come back and they're giving us an update. Could I request, Chairman, that we have a progress report towards the end of this year? Could I also request that the officers set up meetings with interested bodies, notably the parishes, to give them a more detailed report and update, which can then begin to identify the nature of the routes that we may be looking at and bring back when the detailed analysis is concluded. I think that the comments that I've heard where people have said, we need to do this, John Perry's comment in particular, this is good news, let's get on with it and do it as soon as possible. The greatest shame that this whole debate is that we didn't have the debate that we're having this evening 20 years ago, because had we done so, we'd have a relief road now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Chittenden.
Just very quick, just say that I support totally what Mr. Cooker says. I think that's very good. The £1 billion, of course, is a one-liner almost that came out from the government last, I think it was a week ago. As Councillor Hodson said, it's going to be spread thinly. We don't know who it's going to apply to. They've called it, I think, the bypass tax.
Is this a point of order?
Yeah, it is a point of order. Just to clarify, from my point of view, KCC have an excellent record of getting money out of the government. So at least we have a chance, and maybe it's hopefully something will come out of it that we can hang our hats on.
I don't think that's a point of order, but nicely done, sir.
I mean, in terms of any resolution that comes forward, I know you like to sort of moderate these things and play around with the wording yourself. Could we incorporate a report back, please, before the end of the year?
Perhaps it will feature in a resolution, but what I was actually going to say is I will request that the clerk adds this to our work programme as a standing item, and then at each agenda setting, in collaboration with the Vice Chair, we will press to see what work has happened, and at every moment there's something worth reporting back, we will ensure it to be an agenda item, whether there's a resolution or not.
Chairman, I'm happy with that. I'm just keen now, with the support this seems to be getting, that we move this forward. We don't wait for 2021. We don't wait for anything in particular. We move this forward as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Springett.
Thank you, Chair. The government funding comes with the proviso of permitting development along the bypasses. It's not funding just for a bypass, it's funding for a bypass that enables development. I support the relief road, but it is an absolute two-edged sword, have no doubts about that. I fully understand the Wellington Street issue. You need it to relieve your traffic congestion, your traffic problems. I totally support that. I fully understand where Councillor Taylor-Maggio is coming from, because it will bring development. There is no doubt about that. So it's an absolute two-edged sword. The benefit to Maidstone as a whole will be enormous. It will have a huge impact on Maidstone. So there is an overall benefit. All I'd like to say is, from my perspective, if we're going to get this road, we absolutely have to be ahead of the game with the countryside protection along its route. And that has to have cross-party support. Please do not allow this road to be used as a very convenient dumping ground for the housing in the next local plan, which will be coming up, because it will be the ideal place. Oh, look, we've got this road, let's put the housing along it. So what I would like to ask for is, yes, I would like to say I do support it, but I support it with the proviso of it being a two-edged sword. I would like to ask that perhaps within Maidstone Borough Council, with Mr Egerton's support, we set up a cross-party working group as soon as we can to look at what countryside protection measures we could bring in along the potential routing. We're not going to be able to protect the whole lot, that's never going to happen, but perhaps we need to look at specified pockets that should be protected to prevent it being wall-to-wall development of houses, warehouses, whatever, along both sides of the route. So it's going to bring development. Please do not imagine it won't, but I think we need to be thinking now of which bits should be protected, and we need to be getting ahead of the game of that. So that would be a request that we perhaps set up a cross-party working group within Maidstone Borough Council to try and look at the most sensitive areas that could be potentially protected. Thank you.
I think that's a point very well made, and I think we should be thankful that you are actually a member of the committee that has a hand in that, so your influence will be possible. Councillor Cumming.
Thank you, Chairman. Your scheme of going clockwise round the room leaves me in the unenviable position of being almost tail-end Charlie again, so most of my comments have already been made. I agree with almost all of them. And I would just follow on Councillor Barnard's comment that as this was as part of a £1 billion plan to combat congestion, as reported last Wednesday, the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, said councils will be expected to build bypasses in the worst areas of overcrowded roads. And I fully support the idea of this bypass.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Taylor, I've only just noticed that your name card is upright. Sorry, I didn't see it earlier, so I should come back to you.
Yes, speaking on behalf of CALC. I'd like to thank Councillor Springett for her comments on the environment, very important, and the comments that Geraldine was going to make this evening. CALC has taken account of the KCC's paper, and especially the points made. It will be important that the Borough Council, as planning authority, puts in place strong and enforceable policies that will stop urban sprawl. Now, as far as CALC's concerned, the provision of housing must not be used to fund any relief road. That's from CALC. Thank you.
I think there's another late entry from Councillor Daly, and then I think everybody's had a go, apart from finishing up around here.
I determined to wait, Chairman, till I heard everybody else speak, because I was hoping to hear something completely new. A lot of hilarity is in this chamber from time to time about me and being old and being long-term memory. And I don't mind that because, thank goodness, I've still got a good memory. And I can remember when this particular subject was put into the local transport plan ahead. All the time it was ahead, and it was in at £35 million had been put into the pot, as it were, to be dealt with, but it was always 5 and 10 years ahead. And in 1996, we became within a whisker of this road actually being started. And I can't for the life of me remember what it was now that actually stopped it, but all the discussions as to which side of Leeds it would go and how it would go were pretty well nearly ironed out. And here we are, 20-odd years later, still talking about the same thing as where it should come from and go to. And my feeling is that Leeds Langley actually is very short. It's not a very long, it's not a route, but it's got an awful lot of things in it which are a nuisance in building terms. It's got an ancient castle, it's got ancient woodland, it's got all sorts of things that we don't want to interfere with. And my feeling is, because we've been fixated actually on Junction 8 as being the place to be the destination, and I think that probably needs to be looked at in a different way now. I think if the route went from the Langley area further east at a lower level and then turned north and came out towards Lenham, if you like, with a junction 8A, you probably get a different view. It's a longer route, yes, but when you're talking about 50 million, and it could be 75 million, no, we'll go for broke. Say it's going to cost 75 million and get on with it, because I think that I hear what's over there being talked about. Cross-party, we can sit and talk round it, cross-party forever. It'd be very nice to meet, but we've got to get something that comes out at the other end. And my feeling is, it's been going on for such a long time. In 1996, they were looking 15 years ahead. That would have been 2011. Here we are, another 6 years down the line, and still nothing being talked about, except the will to want it to happen. So, I mean, will has got to be turned into fact. And my feeling is that, yes, let's have a cross-party talk. Let's get round a table. Let's get on. But actually wanting to do it. But let's try to avoid all the things that are going to stop it. Because it says in here, you know, feasibility studies, Leeds Castle is still going to be Leeds Castle, is going to be there. The ancient woodland is still going to be there. Unless you tunnel under it and then goodness knows what will happen. But bearing in mind that sometime in the near future, hopefully there's going to be a thing called the Lower Thames Crossing. And when the Lower Thames Crossing comes on, it will want to be connected to our road network. So we're trying to get out of south of the town. All the HGVs have got to come through the town at the moment because there's no such thing. I mean, we could have called this the Great North Road at some stage in the past, but it's got all sorts of names. But what the name is at the moment, I would hope, is let's get it called Hope Road and get it done, please.
Okay. Councillor Garton, you're going to be the last word on this. Nobody else is indicating. We'll close the item after this, so yours the last chance.
Mr. Chairman, let me thank you, first of all, my two Conservative colleagues at borough and county level for requesting this report. The devil will, as we heard tonight, very much be in the detail once we go further down the line. Speaking for my group of Conservative councillors at borough, I wholly welcome this step in the first direction. May I also take the opportunity to thank the officers for their great report. And I'm looking forward to further feasibility work as suggested in the report. May I therefore formally propose that this board formally records its support for the work to progress the delivery of the Leeds and Langley Relief Road and recommends that both authorities will work together on further feasibility work, including traffic modelling and funding options.
I think Councillor Cummings indicated he would like to second that, so I think everybody heard what was said there, registering support. Does anybody need anything clarified? Councillor Cook?
I want what I was saying earlier, Chairman, in terms of the reporting back and the incorporated into any recommendation which will ensure that this is dealt with in the most expedient way by bringing it back to this board and communicating at the earliest possible dates with the parishes. So I'd like to see it included in the work programme in the way that you said, Chairman, but I'd also like to see a recommendation that we will be communicating with the affected parishes before the end of the year. So there will be a mid-term review in terms of looking at the progress on the work that is being done. We can't allow this to drift. That's what's happened in the past, and the only way that I know of ensuring that doesn't happen is to have some
right. So, at the danger of letting the debate drift further, I think what you're asking is that there could be an addition to Councillor Garton's motion that says, and the board requests further update reports during the year. So if the proposer is happy to add that,
with a report to the parishes as well,
and appropriate communication to the parishes.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman.
And other interested groups.
Indeed.
So if you're happy to accept that amendment. Right, we understood you're happy. Second, happy. Seconders happy. If I could take that straight to the vote, then those who wish to support that motion. Counted. Those against that motion? Those that wish to abstain? There must, because I think as the Calc member voted. All right. Sorry, I'm just being... Currently, Calc is not a voting member, so
Yeah.
that's... Sorry to come upon you like that, but not a voting issue. Councillor English, was that your consideration of whether one was missing, just so I've got the numbers correct? But my apologies, I can see it, the sunlight's on it and it makes it completely transparent. Please speak.
Yes, I did want to speak. I wanted to say to Councillor Daly, thank you very much for your suggestion and looking wider on the Langley-Lees bypass, which I think is something that needs to happen on the route, not to be fixated on joining up the dots between Parkwood and Junction 8. I think that is potentially where we've been going wrong in the past, and maybe we need to be looking further afield, and thank you for your comments. Okay, thank you. Can I just check with the clerk that the voting tallied? Yeah. Well, there's a technicality because Councillor Willis joined us, but he's not actually joined the meeting, so not on the attendance list on this occasion. So I'm informed that is in actual fact unanimous. That closes that item. Thank you everyone for your participation and the debate. We'll look forward to further work coming forwards and being reported back. To conclude matters this evening, there is agenda item 14 on the agenda, Highways Works Programme. That is for information only, so everybody's got a copy. Unless there are any very specific items, Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. I did request an update on the before and after results for the Maidstone gyratory system, and there was some discussion that would need to have the signage completed, and it would come.
Chairman and Vice Chair have raised that at agenda setting. It is in the work programme. We were advised it was premature for actually getting meaningful data. It's not lost. That being the case, I'm happy to announce the meeting closed. Thank you everybody for your participation.